Hey everybody, welcome back to Heart Breathings. We are in the thick of it with Preptober. NaNoWriMo is just around the corner, so I thought it would be the perfect time to talk about planning out your characters in terms of who they are, what they've been through, and what their arc is going to be. So that's what we're going to be diving into today, and I cannot wait. So welcome back to Heart Breathings. Let's get started. For me, one of the most satisfying and helpful things to pre-plan before I start writing is my characters, specifically my main point of view characters, but also my most important side characters or secondary characters and my villain, which I know doesn't apply to everyone, but it is important for the type of fiction that I write. Now, before we get started down this road, I do want to also reiterate what I just said in my video from last week about planning your novel is that everyone's process is individual and different. So if you prefer to discover your characters on the page and let them speak to you in dialogue as it flows, that is totally fine. There are no right or wrong, paths. There's just whatever path works for you is always going to be the way that is best for you. So it's really a discovering your own process that is going to help you write faster and write better. What I can do is I can tell you some of the things that have worked for me and I can give you some of the resources. So the two tools that I like to use most when I'm planning out my characters are character profiles and character arcs. And these are two things that I could probably do an entire series of videos on, but for today, we're going to try to keep it simple. A character profile is really all of those details about your character, almost like you were creating an affidavit of them. So you've got your physical appearance, what type of job they have, where they live, where they grew up, what type of relationships they have, all of those details on paper. Brown eyes, they're this age, they're this height. You could get really detailed with your character profiles and say, what's their favorite song? Where did they grow up? What kind of friendships have they had in the past? Have they ever dated anybody? What would be their favorite? Like you could do a full interview on your character's favorite things and stuff like that. And some people find that extremely helpful. But you could also just do some basics and try to understand your character's personality, which is a little bit more of what I'll do. So we'll get into character profiles in just a second. The other one is character arc. And your character arc is really more of the internal journey towards transformation that your character is going to make through this novel or through this series. And the character arc is potentially something that you can have partially figured out before you start writing, but it might also be something that you discover again as you go through the novel. So again, just keep in mind that there are no rules that it's like, man, I got to have all this details figured out or my novel's going to fall apart. It's really just a matter of how much do you as an individual need or want to have planned out before you start writing and what's going to be most helpful for you. Because if you want to write a novel in 30 days, 50,000 word novel in 30 days, it can be about speed and every decision that you have to make on a daily basis in terms of how does this character talk or what's their style, what's their personality, what have they been through, what's their backstory. All of those decisions that you're making are going to make it harder for you to actually sit down and write when you have limited time. Now, I know not everybody in my community is doing NaNoWriMo, so I wanted to make sure that this video was helpful for anyone during any time of their process. But if you are trying to write quickly and you've got that deadline of 30 days, maybe you want to pre-plan some of these decisions ahead of time and just understand that it's a fluid process and it can change as you write. So let's talk about the character profile. Michael Hague, who is just a brilliant screenwriter and teacher, says that this character profile really comes down to four things: your character's physical attributes, their personality, their role, and their background. So I'm pulling this from his book, Writing Screenplays That Sell. And if you look in the description box and towards the end of this video, I'm going to give you a whole list of books that I have found super helpful when it comes to learning about how to create better characters. Because when it comes down to it, really, your characters are just such a huge part of whether or not people are going to want to read your novel. You could have the most thrilling, unique, exciting premise of all time. The story concept is amazing and just action on the page. But if people don't relate or like or enjoy reading your character, they don't have any reason to care about your character, your book is probably going to fall flat. Writing great characters is such an important part of being a great novelist. And so the more that you can pour into learning the craft of writing great characters, paying attention to the characters you have loved in the past and really analyzing, why did I love that character? What did I love most about them? What made them resonate with me so much? That is going to just elevate your writing so much. So even if your pre-planning is just picking out your 5 favorite heroes that you've ever watched in movies and going through with a notebook and analyzing what you know and what you've learned about those characters and what can you bring out from those favorite characters to put into your own character, that might be all the pre-planning that you need. But practical terms, a character profile can be just the physical appearance of your character. So we're talking what color eyes, what color hair, what color skin, how tall are they, how much do they weigh, what is their style, what are their physical attributes. Then you could also give some personality things. So are they a real confident person? Are they somebody who is really gentle and always kind? What's their personality? What do they bring to the table in terms of how they react to other people? What are their relationships? Then you could also figure out what kind of job do they have? Or if they're a teenager, what are they most interested in? Are they a good student? Are they a bad student? Are they responsible? Do they have a bunch of responsibilities at home where they have an absent parent, but 5 young children that they're also taking care of? What's that sort of, like Michael Hague calls it, what's the role that they play in their current world right now? And then you also have this idea of their background. So what have they been through? If we turn to some of our favorite fiction, like Hunger Games, of course, I love YA, so I'm going to bring up a YA example that is widely known. We know a lot about Katniss's history, that we understand her background as someone in this district who lost her father in this mining accident. We know that she feels like she's the one who has to bring home the food. She's the one who becomes the caretaker because of her mother, and she's got this younger sister. So we understand her role and we understand her background. And we see that right from the beginning. And that is such a big part of why when she volunteers to take her sister's place, it's such an emotional moment, even though it's so early in the book, because we care about Katniss. And if you've only ever watched the movies, please go and read at least the first book, because it's just such brilliant character profiling in terms of background and role and personality right from the first chapter. So highly recommend figuring out some of those things, because really your characters are about the emotional impact that they're going to have on the reader. And so kind of pre-planning how to create a character for this particular concept or this particular type of story that you're telling that is going to have the maximum emotional impact on your reader is time well spent, for sure. I'm going to show you my plotting notebook. So this is something that's free for you to download if you would like to join my newsletter list. So I will put the link to join my newsletter down below. This is in my Plot Your Novel workbook that I created a couple years ago. And this is what I use. So this will give you an idea of what I figure out for my main characters. And this is pretty much all I do. And then I'm also going to give you some ideas for how to create character profiles that go beyond this. This is a look at my plotting planner. I tend to do this in an classic sized happy planner type discs. And this is my How to Plot Your Novel workbook. You can grab this for free when you sign up for my newsletter. I'll have a link for you down below and you can just grab it for free. And this has a lot of stuff for plotting. So all of this back here is plot, but the first 2 pages of it really have to do with your character profile and your character arc. So I'm going to talk about what's in here and then what you might want to add to it. So basically, for appearance, all I have is name, age, eye color, hair color, height, and then other appearance notes. So if you want to put what gender or what gender identity your character has, if you want to put what type of style. So sometimes here on other appearance notes, I'll put, wears a lot of jeans and tank tops, or dresses up more often than not, or often wears her hair in a long braid down one side. Anything that really stands out about your character that seems unique or that seems to be kind of their like signature thing you can put here. And then most of the rest of the questions that I have here are more internal type questions that lead me toward their background, the role they play, and those types of things rather than their appearance or their personality. So we'll talk about that in just a second. So these questions are, what is their deepest desire? So for Harper, for example, my main character in my Shadow Demon saga, her deepest desire is really to belong, to have a family of some kind. But she doesn't really admit that at the beginning of the book. That is something that becomes part of her character arc. What do they truly need, even if they don't realize it yet? So this kind of plays into that deepest desire. So what do they truly need? So in order for her to fit in and to, create this family, she needs to begin to love herself and to let go of this sort of false portrayal that she has of like keep pushing everyone away, right? She needs to be able to open up her heart. What happened in her past that hurt her, or what happened in their past that hurt them or made them who they are now? This is really all about your character's wound. So what has caused them to be the way they are now? If your character doesn't trust people, why not? If your character is closed off or they're super sarcastic, why are they like that? And this can be really, really important to start to figure out, what is this backstory, right? What do they now believe to be true about themselves because of that past pain? So this is something similar to what K.M. Weiland talks about in creating character arcs of your main character has a lie that they're telling themselves. So sometimes that can be that I can't trust anyone because no one is trustworthy. It could also be that I have to push everyone away because everyone who gets close to me dies. So those are the types of lies that you might tell yourself. So what do they now believe to be true because of that past pain? And what are they most afraid of due to that wound or worst fears? So for Harper, she's most afraid that any connection that she makes, they're going to abandon her because she's been abandoned by everyone she's ever known. And so that's her worst fear. How do they portray themselves to others, and what is their false self or armor they wear to protect themselves? So I feel like this is really just all kind of playing into these same questions. What do they do? So is it that they become prickly, that they never trust anyone, that they never get close, they have a lot of one-night stands, they have no friends, they're a real loner? Like, what is that look like in their personality? And then what is their true self? Who are they deep down? And this is really going to inform your character arc, because they may not seem like this kind of person at the beginning, but by the time they hit the end of the story, this is who they're really going to be. So Harper might be really defeated and isolated at the beginning, but by the end, who she truly is a real leader. And she hasn't had a chance to really be a leader because she's so isolated, but that's who she is deep down. Then in the notes section here, this is where I like to usually put something more about the character's personality. So this is where I'll be like, they're really sarcastic, or they really, push everyone away. They lie all the time, whatever it might be about this particular character. And that's where I'll put these notes. The next sheet that I have really has more to do with character arc, so I'll talk about that in just a second. But if you want to create a character profile that is more than just this kind of basic things, here are some other ideas. You could create a Pinterest board of your characters. So this could be the types of things they like, the types of jobs they have, and getting real visuals for what your characters looks like, what type of clothes they wear, what type of things they like to surround themselves with, what their apartment looks like, all of those types of things. You could also journal about your character and just let it free flow and see what comes up during your journaling. Another tool people use is to write a letter to you, the author, from your character. So if Harper was your main character, have Harper write you a letter to tell you what she knows about her story. And you could have her write it from a place of the beginning. Here's how she's starting out, telling you about what happened with her mother and how she feels. Or you could have her writing it to you from the end of the story of like, here's how far I've come, and just see what comes up about this character, because that might surprise you. You could also do a character interview if you would like, where you ask your character a bunch of questions, and there you could probably Google this and find a bunch of different character interview examples. and see what comes up. Because sometimes it's just a matter of asking yourself the question and letting your intuition and that inner part of you that knows this character better than you think. And you could also just create a list of any types of characteristics of your particular character. So I hope that gives you some ideas. In the end, your character profile is going to help you make those decisions ahead of time about your character and how they fit into the world. And so if you're struggling with figuring out who your character is, it might just be that you need to start writing and you'll figure them out as you go. But it also might be helpful for you to start plotting your book and start thinking about your character arc, which we're going to get into next, because your character arc can also help you figure out what needs to happen in the novel, because you know how this character needs to change and the emotional impact you want to have on your reader. And then once you know what's happening in the story, you might be able to say, oh, I need a character who starts out like this to make that emotional impact at the end. So it can be sometimes a ping pong, like, okay, I'm going to figure out a little bit about the character, then I'm going to go back to plot, and then I'm going to do more character, and then I'm going to do more plot. And that might be the way it works for you. It definitely is the way that it works for me. So I'm going to give you some ideas on that as well. And just to go ahead and mention this too, it is, I think, helpful to start thinking about how can I make my character unique? How can they come off as somebody who's not just a cliche cardboard cutout robot going across the stage? How can I make them interesting and different and unique? And a lot of this is going to come from that personality and the role that they've played and the background that they've had so far, what they've been through, what wounds they have, what struggles they've overcome, or could come from the fact that they've never had to struggle before. And this plot that you're throwing into them is the very first time they've ever had to find their own strength. So think about that in terms of your character, and that can set you down the right path. Now, your character arc has more to do with the internal shift or transformation. Now, this is where it gets difficult to fit it all into one video, because there are many different types of character arcs. So you have a positive character arc where your character grows in some way in a positive way, but you also do have negative character arcs where your character grows towards the dark side, so to speak. And another popular thing that you see in a lot of like police detective, mystery thriller type things where you have, and even urban fantasy sometimes, where you have kind of the main character that goes across multiple books for a long period of time, is you have a more flat character arc where your character doesn't really grow and change in any substantial way from one book to the next. And it's more plot driven than it is character arc driven. So you see that with a lot of police procedurals or detective stories, or sometimes urban fantasy and other things like that. So it's helpful to know what type of character arc you're writing. If you want to study more about this, I highly recommend K.M. Weiland's book, Creating Character Arcs. This one is more advanced, I would say, in terms of really understanding how it all fits together. It's brilliant, but it's a little bit overwhelming, I felt, at first read. But if you want to read some really great book, if you want to read a really great book that has great examples of different types of character arcs, if you want to figure out what kind yours is, definitely pick that up. Again, linked in the description for you. I am 100% of the time dealing so far in my writing with positive character arcs, and I think most of us are. And so that's usually where I am. And the book and resource that made the biggest difference for me in figuring out how to create a piece of my character arc and plan it before I start writing was James Scott Bell's book, Write Your Novel from the Middle. Now, he has since expanded on this concept of writing your novel from the middle in a beat he calls the mirror moment, into a book now called Superstructure, where he talks about the entire plot of the novel. So you could pick up either one of these books and get some information. But if you really want to hone in on this mirror moment, definitely pick up Write Your Novel from the Middle. Again, tons of resources for you linked in the description box. But he basically talks about how when he was analyzing films, he noticed that along with this midpoint, this changes everything plot point, there often was an internal beat in the character arc in movies from different genres, from The Hunger Games again, to Lethal Weapon, to I think he mentions Casablanca in there, just totally different genres. There's this emotional beat in the middle that he calls the mirror moment, which is a moment where your character is acting as if they're looking in a mirror, right? Not physically, but metaphorically looking in a mirror and saying, what have I become? They're seeing the truth of themselves. So this is what K.M. Weiland calls the lie your character tells themselves. And it's this moment where your character's coming face to face with, who have I become? And this realization that if I don't change, I'm going to die. And that death can be a literal death in some cases, or depending on the type of genre you're writing, it could be a metaphorical death. Like, I will never see my dreams come true. I will never fall in love. I will never be the person I was meant to be if I don't change. And it's that mirror moment that propels them toward that transformation that you're going to see at the end. So it's kind of a triangle. So let me show you a little bit more about how I use this concept when I'm planning my novel. Okay, so now we're back in this planner, and this is where we really start to think about character arcs. So in a minute, I am going to talk about goal, motivation, and conflict. So this is here in this sheet, and this comes from Deborah Dixon's book, Goal, Motivation, and Conflict, that I'll have linked for you down below. And then this character arc section here, where are they in the beginning of the story? Where are they in the mirror moment or middle of the story? And how do they end up? This is what I'm talking about with James Scott Bell. So I'm going to just kind of pull to this empty sheet here, and I'm going to show you what I like to do when I'm trying to figure out my character's arc. So I will often create this triangle. So this comes from his book, Write Your Story from the Middle. And this point here is the beginning, where your character is in terms of their arc and their internal progression. At the beginning of the story, this is the middle of the story, and this is the end of the story. And so a lot of times, if you think about what is this mirror moment? What is this change or die moment? Or you think about, what do I need my character to have changed into? What type of character do they need to be by the end of this story? Then you can really start to flesh this out. And all you need is these 3 points. And this is often where I start with all of my character arcs. So let's say you're writing a romance novel with a main heroine who doesn't trust anyone. Let's say she was hurt in her past, her father abandoned her, and she just has major trust issues. So here in the where does your story begin, you might put trust issues, and you might have filled out this early part of this workbook with why she has these trust issues, what happened with her father, why she feels she can never trust anyone, and how does she act because of that. Maybe she has decided that she has trust issues because she also feels like she isn't worthy of love, right? So she doesn't trust anyone, she feels unworthy, and she pushes everyone away. So if you know that's how she starts out the story, that pretty easily can inform how you know she needs to end the story, because in order for her to become someone who's the heroine of a romance novel, she's going to have to get over all this stuff in order to fall in love with the right guy, right? So we can sit here and we can say, okay, by the end of this story, she needs to be someone who trusts again and who sees her own worth, who understands that she's worthy of love. And instead of pushing everyone away, she's in love, right? Yay. So hopefully you guys can see that. Let me kind of zoom in a little bit. So we've got trust issue, and she's unworthy. She pushes everyone away. By the end of the novel, she needs to have transformed and changed, because in order for her to be capable of falling in love, she has to learn to trust. She has to learn to see her own worth, and she has to be able to fall in love and open up her heart. So this mirror moment, or this middle point here, needs to be what James Scott Bell calls a change or die moment. So a lot of times this will be a moment for our heroine where she sees a glimpse of what life could be like if she became this person. Maybe it's a rare moment where the hero makes her laugh, or maybe it's a moment where they're intimate together and she starts to understand that, like, maybe this guy's different. And if you learn and you've watched enough story, you know that this kind of moment where she sees a glimpse of her happiness is going to send her into a spiral, most likely, where she pushes him away again. And that leads us to the black moment, which then becomes the catalyst for her massive transformation. So just to use a different example, my current novel, The Disappearance of Vanessa Shaw, I have many characters. So I've got 7 potentially 8 point of view characters. But the main character of this story for me is Lorelai. She's just the main person. So Lorelai is where I'm going to start. And at the beginning of this book, she's in deep depression. She feels like she's got a lot of guilt over what happened. She's seeking closure. Sorry for my really bad handwriting here. She's seeking closure. She's depressed. And in fact, she doesn't know that she has a real reason to continue on with her life. Then by the end of the story, in order for it to be a positive character arc, she needs to have started down some kind of healing journey. So she's going to have closure. She's going to understand that it's not her fault what happened. Or is it? Dun, dun, dun. And she's going to, let go of that guilt. She's going to find a path to moving forward. So that is going to mean that this midpoint moment, this middle mirror moment for her is going to be a moment where she realizes that she does have a future ahead of her, that she does want to live. Because if she has no real reason to live here and she's feeling guilty, this change or die moment for her here is going to be it can be change or die, or what James Scott Bell says, it can also be what have I become? And for her, this is going to be a moment of understanding that she has really, since Vanessa disappeared, she has really let her life go off the rails. And so it's going to be a moment of like, oh my gosh, if I continue down this path, I'm going to die. Basically, I really will die. And so she's got this glimpse of like, maybe I do have what it takes to solve this mystery and move on with my life. And so now she's going to move toward closure, but not before she passes through the true death stakes here in the middle. But this, for me, is where I start with my character arc. And I will forever be grateful to James Scott Bell for introducing me to this concept, because for me, this really unlocks so much of what's going on with my character. Because if I can see who they are at the beginning and how they need to transform by the end, and then I can usually figure out, so what is it that this mirror moment has to say? Change or die, or what have I become? And so how does that play into their character arc? Then once I figure out just those 3 points, I can really start to flesh out what is her journey from this to this? What types of moments or experiences does she need to have along the way to come to this realization that she has a future? She needs to have some kind of connection with someone. She needs to start solving the mystery. She needs to understand that there were some secrets Vanessa was keeping that made her not understand the full picture. So there's going to be a lot of those things. When we move back up to our romance heroine up here, we can look and say, okay, so she's got these trust issues. She pushes everyone away. In order for her to get to this point where she sees a glimpse of what life could be like if she started to trust again, we have to take her on a journey to that. So there's going to be scenes here that lead her to that moment. And so this is how your character arc can really help you plot your novel and really figure out how it's going to go. Then you also need for this moment, this mirror moment, to start to lead them down a path toward the dark moment where she's going to basically break up and feel like there's, all hope is lost. And then eventually, of course, the grand gesture where the transformation occurs. So I think character arc can really help you to understand, even just this 1, 2, 3 part of character arc can really help you understand how to write your novel. So it's really pretty cool. Whew. Okay, so I know this is a lot. I hope this has been super helpful for you. There's so much more that I could say about this. The other thing, there's 2 more things I want to say. One being that the other thing that can be super helpful in coming up with your character arc is to also go through their goal, motivation, and conflict. So of course, this also comes from Deborah Dixon, but is talked about in many different books, including Michael Hague's Writing Screenplays That Sell and Story Genius. A lot of people talk about this. So it's this idea that your main protagonist is going to have a outer goal, external goal. So this is the thing they want to get, the person they want to defeat, the revenge, whatever. They've got that external goal that drives the plot, but then you have an internal goal as well. So for example, this could be my character Harper at the beginning of Beautiful Demons. She is alone. She's isolated. She thinks nobody loves her. She doesn't fit in anywhere. And so her internal trajectory or her internal goal is one that may not be aware it's what your character needs, but it might not be something they're aware of until the middle of the novel in that midpoint moment. So for Harper, her real goal is she wants to belong. She wants to have a family. And that really becomes tied into the theme of the entire series, which is this: we're stronger as a family. The more that we can build together this positive connection and positive relationships, the more we can defeat anything that comes at us. And so this first book starts with her feeling completely alone and abandoned. And so part of her character arc and her internal goal is to create a family of her own, or to find people that she fits in with. But that's not what the book is about. The book is about a murder mystery, right? But we're talking about that sort of invisible internal character arc that your character's going through. So definitely think about that too. So not just the external goal, but what's my character's internal goal? Meaning, what do they need? What do they need in order to change? When you're talking about a romance, a lot of times too, you're talking about two characters playing off of each other, sometimes more than two, but we'll stick with two. So you've got, the hero and heroine, or depending on what genders you're dealing with, you've got the romantic couple here. And they, for some reason, are not able to be together until they transform. And that's really at the heart of what romances are all about, is that these two people who are meant to be together need to release themselves from the pain of their past, and they have to learn to love each other. And that usually takes some kind of transformation. And that's where the emotional impact comes from. So depending on what genre you're writing, really, if you can identify what is that internal journey that my character needs to take, how did they need to transform, then that's where you get the real emotional impact in your novel. So if you want to read more about that, check out Goal, Motivation, and Conflict from Deborah Dixon, and all of the resources that I have for you down below. Second thing that I wanted to bring up before we go is, how much of this do you have to do for those secondary characters? So the profile stuff, I do a lot of that for my secondary characters. But when it comes to character arc, I don't usually feel that it's necessary to have a full character arc for secondary characters. So I don't think you need to go through this idea of internal goal for each of your side characters that never actually come on stage as a point of view character. So maybe take a moment as you begin writing to think about which of my characters need an arc. So if you're writing a romance, both of those characters need to have an arc, right? They both need to have some kind of transformation to come together. If you're writing a single protagonist like beats the bad guy, then maybe you just need that single protagonist to have their own character arc. And interestingly, I just started reading The Heroine's Journey by Gail Carriger, and I think it's brilliant. So might be another one that goes on the resource list to really start thinking about the difference between the hero's journey and the heroine's journey. And it's kind of blowing my mind. So I'm enjoying that right now too. So I know that this was a lot of information, and I know that there's so much more that we could dive into when it comes to character arcs. But the main things that I want you to remember is, a character profile means deciding ahead of time some of those things about your character's physical appearance, their job, their personality, who surrounds them, and what they've been through in their past. Then your character arc is really about, how does all that stuff you figured out in their profile and all the things maybe you figured out when it comes to plotting your novel play into how your character changes over the course of this book. Do they need to become stronger? Do they need to learn to trust? And another thing to keep in mind is that that character arc is often going to be very closely tied to the theme of the novel. So if you have a novel whose theme is coming home again, then you might have a character who has an arc of really learning to trust themselves and to allow themselves to be happy, to not think about the bright lights, big city, but instead to understand that happiness comes from within. So that might be part of the character arc. If you have a theme in your book that is man versus machine, then you might have a character arc there where your character is learning to find his inner strength so that he can be strong enough to fight against a machine that doesn't have a soul, right? So it could be some of those things, but they're often tied so very closely together. So that might be something that sparks something for you as well when you start thinking about what's your theme. So we're going to go a little bit more into this when it comes to series planning and multiple POV in Sunday's video. video. I'm also going to have a bonus video for you guys tomorrow that's totally unrelated to Preptober, where I'm going to share some fun Erin Condren goodies for the holidays and my new Erin Condren Hello Kitty planner. So that'll just be a fun kind of Friday video for you guys. But if you have been enjoying this series of Preptober videos, I hope that you'll subscribe, like this video, because it does help tell YouTube that other people might like it too. And go ahead and leave a comment down below and let me know how much of your characters you like to have planned out in advance. And I will see you guys in the comments. Bye for now.